If you're going to ride in the winter, having the right gear is crucial to stay warm and dry. That's especially true for your hands, since they're a contact point with the bike and control the gears and the brakes. You've got two options here: a good old pair of gloves, or the less common but still popular pogie. Aside from a couple of experimental rides, gloves have always been my go to. But when 45 North sent me a box of gear to try out that included both flat and drop bar pogies, I knew I'd have to give them a real shot. In this video, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of pogies and how they compare to gloves so you can know which is best for you. So let's get into it. Before jumping into the pros and cons, I want to give a brief overview of each thing that I used so you know where I'm coming from. Let's start off with the pogies. First of all, what the heck is a pogie anyway? As someone who grew up in Texas, I had no idea what this was until I moved to a place where it snowed. Basically, it's a big open pocket that attaches to your handlebars and encloses all of your controls in a wind, waterproof, and sometimes insulated fabric. They're most common on flat bars, but 45 North included their Draugenklaw drop bar pogies for me to try out. They're made from a soft shell fabric that keeps wind and water out, and have a fairly large opening at the top so you don't feel so attached to the bike. Installation is quick and easy, as you simply slide the drop through the top part and funnel it through the elastic at the bottom. You then put the upper Velcro section around the top part of the bar and you're done. The inside has a fleece lining, and the suggested temperature range is 15 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The Draugenclaws are also available in a flat bar version, but for flat bars, I received the harsher weather-focused Cobrafist. Yeah, they've got some pretty cool names. With 400 grams of synthetic insulation and a nylon outer shell, these pogies are rated for 0 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're riding in warmer conditions, there are zippered vents on the top and bottom for temperature regulation. And if you're in really cold or snowy weather, there are drawstrings to close the openings around your forearms and trap heat in. The outer side attaches to the handlebar with some included bar end plugs to keep the pogie in the ideal position. The final thing to mention on the pogies is that both have reflective graphics on them because winter riding means shorter days and you're often riding in the dark. The gloves I've been using this winter are also from 45 North, the Sturmfist 3s. The Sturmfist lineup has a few different variations of material and insulation, but they're generally rated for 10 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, have a water and wind resistant exterior, and some sort of wool lining for comfort. The version I got separates your fingers into 3 different compartments: your thumb in one, index finger in another, and the last 3 all together. Keeping your fingers together keeps them a bit warmer overall, as they all generate heat together. That said, I've also used gloves that went with a 2 and 2 configuration, and I found it really hard to use the brakes in a way I was comfortable with. So while they may have been a little warmer overall, I appreciate the better control I get from having my index finger free. As I mentioned, before this I had only used pogies a couple of times, and even those rides were probably only 30 minutes long. I didn't really hate them or love them on those rides, I just didn't understand why you'd pick them over gloves. After using them fairly extensively this last winter, the reasons have become a lot more clear. First off, I didn't quite understand how pogies work, because I was positive you still had to use gloves with them if you wanted to be warm. As it turns out, not only do they provide protection from the elements outside, they do a really great job of trapping your body heat with very little or no insulation. This was really apparent on a ride with temps in the upper 20s. Despite being below freezing outside and not wearing any gloves, my hands and forearms actually got a little too hot in the Cobrafist. Luckily, the zippered vents are there, and I was able to play with those to regulate the temperature for the rest of the ride. The drop bar Draugenclaws don't have any insulation, but they stay reasonably warm from the fleece liner when the temperatures are above maybe 20 degrees or so. Where the magic of pogies really comes in, though, is at colder temperatures. If you're only using gloves, colder weather means thicker gloves, and thicker gloves mean a trickier time using all of those controls. With pogies in the mix, a pair of thinner and lighter gloves works great in all but the most extreme temperatures. If you've ever used drop bar shifters and brakes with thick gloves on, chances are you've accidentally shifted the wrong direction because you can't really feel what you're pressing. With thin or no gloves, it's not as much of a problem, and you can easily shift the right direction or get a good grip on your brake levers. A second advantage to Pogies is temperature regulation, which is extremely crucial when you're riding in cold weather. You tend to generate way more heat while climbing or on the flats than you do while descending, and surprisingly, this affects your hands a lot. So even when temperatures have dipped below 5 degrees, I found my hands overheating and sweating, which is just uncomfortable. With Pogies, you can either remove the thin gloves you have on, or open the vents a little if it has them to keep the temps right where you want them. The final advantage I want to mention is that Pogies give you a little more protection from the elements than gloves alone. If it's snowing a ton or you take a spill in the snow, as we all inevitably do, your hands, forearms, and controls don't get caked and covered in snow. That's not a huge deal to begin with, but it can make brake levers a little slippery and just be annoying to have snow everywhere. You still might get some snow inside the Pogies, but in general, things stay protected and dry. As great as Pogies are, there were of course a few downsides compared to gloves. First off, they won't work with every cockpit setup out there. I wanted to use the Cobrafist with the Ren Perseverance bars, but with the armrest mounted on the bar, they just didn't fit right. I could have removed them and made it work, but I really wanted to keep those on for some longer, flatter rides on packed gravel roads. The drop bar Draugenclaws also had a little bit of an install issue thanks to the Redshift cruise control grips on the drops. I had to remove the grips first, pull the Pogies on, and then put the grips back on the best that I could. It worked, but it was a little trickier and it didn't quite fit over even the top end of the grip. If you're not running a weird setup or accessory, you probably won't have any problems, but if you do, just know Pogies might not fit quite right. Another thing I found that's specific to drop bar Pogies is you no longer have access to the controls when you're in the drops. You kind of do if you can squeeze the levers over the Pogies, but for the majority of people and situations, the drops become a hands-on position only. I already mentioned gloves can make it a bit harder too, but they don't completely eliminate the main hand position for technical riding. So if the drops are one of your go-to positions, I don't know that I would recommend putting some Pogies on. The final negative I found with them is that your hands and arms can feel a little bit trapped, which isn't super confidence-inspiring on technical terrain. It reminds me a bit of using clipless pedals, where there's an extra step when you're bailing that you have to force to become second nature. Instead of just pulling your hands off the bars in whatever direction you want, you gotta pull them out first. It's not a big deal when you're riding on snow, as your landing tends to be soft anyway, but if you're doing some snowless cold weather riding, it can be a little nerve-wracking at first. Like clips, I have gotten used to it, but if I was gonna do a lot of technical riding, I'd probably settle for gloves. So that's it, my experience with Pogies after not giving them a fair shot years ago. After many hours of riding this winter, I can see why they're super popular on fat bikes, especially among the endurance race crowd. They keep your hands and controls protected from rain and snow, are surprisingly warm, and allow you to better regulate temperature than just using gloves alone. The downsides are real, but for the most part, just require some slight adjustments to your cockpit setup or your riding style. I don't think they're for everyone or every type of rider, but if you struggle with cold fingers, have difficulty with your controls and gloves, or want precise control over your body temperature, Pogies are a great option. Let me know what your thoughts on Pogies and gloves are, or what you use in the winter to keep your hands warm and dry. I want to say thanks to 45 North for sending both these Pogies and gloves out for me to run for this little experiment. While my drop bar riding style and use case doesn't match up super well with the Draugenclaws, they're still a well-designed option, and I think many people will find them useful, especially the road and commuting crowd. The Cobrafists, on the other hand, are something I've really enjoyed and would totally use for all of my winter riding. So if this video made you want to try Pogies out, be sure to check out what 45 North has to offer. If you want to see more of my videos, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to support me, consider buying a sticker or leaving a super thanks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.